sponsor al emisiunii, Fundația Art Production, Gigi Căciuleanu, Romania Dance Company.
Bună seara! Bine v-am regăsit la Garantat 100%. Invitatul nostru din seara asta e cineva despre care aș putea să vorbesc până poimâine, pentru că are o biografie extrem de bogată, dar o să fie suficient să vă spun că avem privilegiu să-l primim la Garantat 100% pe Jean-Michel Jarre. Good evening!
Good evening.
Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. It's
My
a privilege
pleasure.
to have you in our show.
Thank you. Likewise.
Jean-Michel, I will kindly ask you to begin with remembering your mother. She was, first of all, a famous character and a famous member of La Résistance. How was she as a mother?
I think my parents split up when I was 5.
Yep.
And I really grew up under her influence, and we became not a couple but a duet. And my mother, of course, played a major role in my life, because I was her only child.
Yes.
And also she took the role of the father and the mother, but not being too much, which is sometimes the case when you have a woman taking care of an only boy. Sometimes this situation could be too invasive for the child. It was not the case. She really succeeded to balance her presence around me. And of course, she was also an extraordinary woman, very funny, and also, as you said briefly, that she's been a hero and a great figure of the French Resistance. She's been caught by Nazis 3 times, and she escaped 3 times, and she gave me this sense of resilience, of tolerance.
Your father is an immense composer, Maurice Jarre. He composed lots of scores for the most famous film in the history of cinema, and I will just mention Lawrence of Arabia, Dead Poets Society, I don't know, The Longest Day, Jesus of Nazareth, and there are lots.
Dr. Zhivago.
Exactly. But you had a different relationship to your father.
Yeah, it's quite strange when you have a conflict with your father. In a sense, it's probably easier to build as a reaction to build yourself
Was it a conflict in your case,
the father
or a
image.
distance?
But in my case, I didn't have that. It was just an absence, and it's probably more difficult to deal with a kind of grey hole and an absence than having a conflict with his dad or with your dad. And so that was quite. It was quite difficult in my childhood, but at the same time, I think that it's also it's quite strange, because we are both musicians, but
yes.
It was quite abstract when I was a child, because he left for America at a very early stage, and in those days the work of a soundtrack, of being a soundtrack composer, it was not like today, where it's more known, more recognized. So it was quite abstract. So I was not really influenced by his music. I know about his music, but it was far away from me. It was like a parent on the other side of the pond.
So psychologically speaking, it was not your main motivation?
No, not consciously, actually. So it worked maybe at the level of chromosomes, maybe.
But let's get back to your mother, because we would call this today, I don't know, parenting, or something like this.
Yeah.
In her strategy of raising you, she pushed you, she exposed you to art, to culture, to music. And at a certain moment, when she was selling all things in Saint-Ouen flea market, you discovered a legendary object, something very important in your life, which was the trumpet violin of Boris Vian's. At that moment when you discovered this object, did you know who Boris Vian had been?
Yes, I had an instant explanation from my mom, because actually my mom, to complete what you had just said, I mean, was working at the flea market in Paris, and it was in days where it was a kind of it was interesting, the flea market at that time, because it was a kind of the other side of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, where you had a kind of elite of artists, I would say, like Jean-Paul Sartre and all these kind of great writers. And at the flea market, it was more hippie, more bohème, and then this whole ambience for me actually has been, of course, of a great influence in my teenage and even my childhood. And by coincidence, as you said, my mom had this little shop for every weekend, close to the Boris Vian's brother, and he was as crazy as Boris, and he was selling all these crazy instruments à la Marcel Duchamp, very surrealistic, and this famous violin trumpet, and was absolutely fascinated by this kind of instrument because it was so unexpected. And my mom was opening my eyes and my heart and my mind to and my sensitivity to arts, not only music, but she showed me contemporary arts, people like Soulage and Hans Hartung and Pollock and all that, but also more the Impressionists also. So I've been very lucky to have a mom quite open to arts in general, theater, and she was, for instance, she brought me one day to watch the only concert in Paris of Kalsoum, and it was quite unusual. We were not linked partly with the Arabic world. I was, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10, and when I remember it was in this very famous hall in Paris, in Olympia, and when we went out from the theater, I said, I want to marry this, I want to marry her.
And you were 10?
Yes.
Do you know that in one of Boris Vian's novels, which is called L'écume des jours, he has his mind created a very interesting musical instrument, which was called le pianoctale. And the pianoctale was a piano, you were playing something, and the piano was preparing a drink. So you were able to drink a Duke Ellington, for example, Duke Ellington in a glass. How could that instrument be in your hands?
First of all, probably unexpected drinks. Because I think that, you know, it's a very interesting question behind what you're saying is actually the idea where a musical idea is coming from. A musical idea is by essence coming in an expected way, and the way it's coming from is coming from it can come from the conversation we have, from the sound of the rain against a window, from an excerpt of a movie what you saw the week before. And all these random elements, at one moment, they go together and prepare a drink à la Boris Vian to give you something that's going to excite me, excite us as artists, to create something that you decide to explore this idea rather than anything else. But I would say, you know, that this relationship with the instruments that you're talking about make me think about my grandfather also, a major figure in the father figure in my life, in my childhood.
What was he playing? Oboe, clarinet? What?
He was playing oboe, and he was an engineer. He was an extraordinary person. He was a musician playing oboe, but he was an engineer and an inventor. And he created, and for me, his atelier was a kind of magic place. One day, he was creating a coffee machine, electric coffee machine, with the engine of a vacuum cleaner.
Wow.
And the skin, if I could say that, of a scooter, a Vespa. So it was absolutely crazy instrument. One day he came into the kitchen of my grandparents, and he put that and said, "Okay, let's try." To my grandmother, let's try to put to do some coffee. And my grandmother was very phlegmatic, very calm. Put some grains, and you had actually coffee all over the kitchen, and with a noise like an aeroplane. And she very calm. She said, "Doesn't work." And my grandfather disappeared to try again. And one day it worked. So it was this kind of childhood I had with him. And he gave me, for instance, my first second-hand tape recorder, German tape recorder, which was also another very important object in my life.
At a certain moment, you were also exposed when you were very young to the music, and I mean live, to the music of Archie Shepp, John Coltrane, Chet Baker, Don Cherry. How was that?
Yeah, it's another twist of destiny, I would say. My mom was, during the Second World War, she became quite close to a very interesting person, a woman called Mimi Ricard. And this woman, after the war, created the most influential modern jazz club called le Checky Pêche, Rue de la Huchette in Paris. And my mom was used to visit her every other Sunday, and on Sunday afternoon. And while the girls were talking around to the bar, I was going downstairs in the cellar, in the cave, where these musicians, I had no idea about where rehearsing. And as you said, you had people like that, like Archie Shepp and John Coltrane and Chet Baker. And so I was the kid of the club, and they know me, and I was talking to them. And I was fascinated by these great musicians. And one day for it was my 11th birthday, I think, Chet Baker sat me on an upright piano, and he played like this, like we are, even closer, for a few minutes. And it was probably one of my strongest musical shock in my life.
Were you aware of who Chet Baker was at that?
No, I had no real idea. I mean, my mom said, after he's a great jazz man, but I was still quite young. So I realized that he was a great musician, but I didn't know much more. And that was my first shock, I mean, physically, about the impact of the sound on your body. That even today, when I'm talking to you about this souvenir, I can still feel the air of the instruments on my chest. And he told me two things, for me very, very important for a musician. He said, what's important is to escape from the melody.
To escape from the melody.
So the melody is important, but what is even more important is to get away, to escape, and to play around. And also, beyond the melody, what's the most important thing is the sound. Music is made of sounds, and of course that's of course changed my life later on. I didn't know yet, but I realized. I'm realizing now how important this little phrase he told me how important it was in my life. The fact that music is not based only on notes, based on solfeggio, but basically and first of all made of sounds.
Could it have been the fact that he had an accident and his type of playing music was so different at that time?
Absolutely. It's very, very interesting. I learned in my life that music is like judo. I mean, to transform strong points, your weaknesses into strong points. Chet Baker is a very good example. Another fantastic magician of trumpet is Miles Davis.
Yep.
Miles Davis has had a problem of playing quickly. And then because of that, because of this weak point, it's transformed it into something else by exploring the idea of less is more. And Chet Baker had also, because of his personal life and accidents, and he had to go around that. And what's interesting, talking about this, you take Chet Baker and Miles Davis playing an instrument that has been played by maybe millions or hundreds of thousands of people musicians in the world, and you can listen to 30 seconds of Miles or 30 seconds of Chet Baker, you know exactly who is it. And this is what we call style, but I have immense admiration for that with just a normal instrument, that suddenly you can express your own personality, your own style. This is something unique.
There's a very interesting interview of yours in The Guardian, and you talk about Stravinsky and about the impact that Stravinsky had upon you. You also talk about Kulthum, but you also said that Ray Charles's Georgia on My Mind had a huge impact upon you. And with your words, you said, I realized that music can talk to your tummy. I was so impressed by the organic sensuality coming from Ray Charles's music. There was no intellectual process, and it was great. End of quotation. What do you mean by that was no intellectual process?
Music is primarily depending on intuition and instincts, and not necessarily only coming from a kind of cerebral or intellectual process. And what's interesting with Ray Charles is actually like lots of great artists, the sense of the quest for the ultimate sound, the ultimate, I mean, to find your own style, your own path in the dark, in the sense. And for Ray Charles, talking about finding your path in the dark, it's of course even more appropriate, I would say. I was not thinking about this when I was mentioning the darkness that he was actually depending on day-to-day life because of his handicap. But what's interesting is actually, the most interesting artists for me, musicians, are people who are actually trying to create a fusion between two different, creating kind of oxymoron. The fact that he had to suddenly he took the Gospels and invented a rhythm and blues by putting something darker on the kind of pure spiritual approach of Gospels. So that because of that, he created something that could talk to everybody. And also something else with Ray Charles is actually what makes, if you take Ray Charles, David Bowie, or Edith Piaf, for instance, when you listen to them for even 1 minute, you have goosebumps and you are totally deeply affected by their style. And these three musicians, like a lot of others, they don't play in tune and they don't play in following the rhythm. They're always outside the box. They're always slightly off. What interpretation is all about. I mean, when you kind of disobey from the melody itself, or when you are slightly off the tempo, and this is what creates the emotion. And to go back to Chet Baker, is what he wanted to tell me, that to escape to the melody, to escape and to play around the melody, to play around the sound, and just being always slightly off. And this is what I think is true in your work, the way you are asking questions, for instance, to try to be slightly off, and that's what makes, in my opinion, more and more human beings responding to and being moved by an artist more than somebody else.
Since we talk about off, what was exactly le groupe de recherche de musique concrète?
So in 1948, you had two guys in France called Pierre Schaeffer and Pierre Henry, and these two musicians and also for Pierre Schaeffer, he was also a writer and a scientist, probably also influenced by surrealism movement, the surrealist movement. To say, okay, music is not only depending on notes based on solfeggio, as I said, but also, before anything, music is made of sounds. In a sense, quite close to jazz, in a sense. Apart from that, they say, I mean, we can actually mix the sound of nature, the sound of the city, and mix that into orchestral sounds. For instance, mixing the sound of a bird with a clarinet, the sound of an engine of a car with percussions. I mean, to approach music in a totally different way by not with a classical solfeggio approach and harmony as we do in the Western world, but thinking in a sense that in this kind of maelstrom of sounds, we can pick and steal some noises and making music with it.
That's why they called it musique concrète.
Exactly. And this is quite, if you think of it, it's quite close to music, to abstract painting. Actually, abstract painting should be called peinture concrète. Why? Because people such as Pollock or Hartung or Soulage, I mean, all these great figures of the what we call lyrical abstraction are actually dealing with oil, with earth, with Dubuffet also, with lots of different concrete elements to create something what is not necessarily figurative, what is not necessarily illustrative, but to create something raw, more brut, in a sense, and that will really change my life, because I studied at the with Jeanne Drouet, who is a teacher from a conservatoire at Paris. Also, I was playing in some local rock bands, and my grandfather has been very important, because before the Groupe de Recherche, he offered me this second-hand tape recorder, and I became obsessed with this machine. I was recording almost everything, day and night. And one day I played the tape backwards, and I thought that aliens were talking to me. So, and then I started in my small rock band to process the sound of my guitar, the sound of drums. And then when I came into this music research center with these great musicians, established musicians, they were talking a language I had understood because of that, because of my own approach of sounds. And I said, you know, it was in days where I was listening to rock bands, and that was of course the revolution of my generation and generation to come. But I said somehow it's a revolution coming from America, from Anglo-Saxon countries. It's not my revolution as a continental European, as a French or continental European, Romanian, Germany, Italy. I mean, something else. And when I found this Groupe de Recherche and this approach of music, I said, this is our revolution. And this is the reason why that electronic music later on, electroacoustic music, is definitely coming from our continent, from continental Europe. It has nothing to do with jazz, blues, or rock. It's coming from our heritage of classical music, and with a total different approach, maybe more impressionistic and less pop. And this is the reason why suddenly I realized at my late teenage that it was what I wanted to pursue.
You were listening to Stockhausen as well.
Yes, yeah, because Stockhausen was like a kind of German Frank Zappa, if I can say that, exploring in lots of different different areas, and also with with something absolutely deeply European. And I think that you can't escape to your roots. And we have, as Romanian and French and Italian, for instance, this kind of Latin roots also, and which is different from the German ones.
Yep.
And Stockhausen was in my like when I was working with Pierre Schaeffer, Pierre Henry, these great musicians in France of musique concrète. Stockhausen was the other side of the coin, in a sense.
You said European music. That's very, very interesting, because if you think of our conversation up to this moment, this is a puzzle that configurates the roots of your inspiration and the universe of your music. But at a certain moment, you took off. I mean, you let everything apart and you made your music. It's fascinating that almost everybody at the beginning rejected Oxygen as a producer. What was in your mind at that moment when they were saying, no, thank you?
You know, I've been used to that, because Oxygen was not my first attempt. I mean, my first...
you had two previous attempts.
My first album has been sold maybe 100 copies or something like this, which is quite a lot these days in terms of physical vinyl or whatever, but whatever. So, you know, I think that I was doing lots of songs in France, and I had already a kind of success being composing and writing songs and doing, and I was still obsessed by the fact that I would like to establish this kind of link between experimental music and pop. So I was continuing to do my travaux pratiques, you know, and so I was not particularly frustrated, and you know, but I knew that I was doing something special. When you write some music, you think about yourself. It's in a sense rather selfish activity.
It is.
Creating, because you create for yourself. I mean, to soothe your pain or your problems, or to escape also. And if you meet the audience, good news. But it's not necessarily the case. You can have lots of artists. For lots of artists, they will maybe never meet the audience, their audience. It doesn't. Does it devaluate what they're doing? Not necessarily. So it's the trap is when you have. I mean, success is like an addiction. So you have to be careful. After the first success, you have to be very careful. Before, it's less dangerous than after, I think.
We're in a very important moment of our conversation, because talking about success and what some people understand by success, I don't know, it just came through my mind now. There's a moment in an interview of David Gilmour's, and I don't know if he was perfectly aware of what he was saying at that moment about, I don't know, the historical moment, because he said at the beginning, it was all about making money and being famous. Now referring to yourself, in the most honest way possible, at the end of the 70s, were you smelling the success that was going to follow?
No.
Were you hoping for it? Were you thinking of it?
Actually, you're always hoping to be recognized and to be loved by an audience. If you, as an artist, if you create some music, is basically first of all the idea of sharing your work with the outside world. So of course, but is it linked to money, or is it linked to? I don't think so. And it's quite strange that David Gilmour said that, because I remember that in the early days of Pink Floyd, because we were in the same record company, and they were really exploring things, yes. But they were exploring and not, of course, not doing pop music. They were more in the kind of prog rock. It was not the easiest way to make money, but maybe afterwards.
It could have been Roger Waters, not David Gilmour. But the words were exactly like this. It was all about being famous and making money.
Yeah, but maybe it's an attitude, maybe. I would say, I don't know. But anyway, it has never been my case. I was not, for me it was more to explore. Mm-hmm. My priority now I'm looking back of what I've done so far. I think I've been really, I'm really excited by challenges, by surprising myself and whatever. I was always, even when I was in my 30s, and I saw some of my colleagues having success, and they were already trying to exploit what they've done, to try to exploit recipes, their own recipes. And I never been even been able to do that, probably.
To quote yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And but I've always been excited, and this is my engine. My is to try to escape from what I'm doing, to try to find other ways to trap myself, to hijack my style, in a sense, if I have one.
To hijack your style. If you think at this very moment, there's so much music in the world. The world is really almost fed up with music. There's so much music. There's so many images. There's so many spectacular images, so many spectacular music. Honestly, how do you survive as a creator when you look around and you see this immense ocean of music, this huge production, overproduction of music? There's music everywhere. There's a different type of stardom. There's a different type of receiving music. There's a totally different type of selling music, and a completely different style of having, I don't know, the way of perceiving music is different. The way of understanding it, the way of manipulating music. This complex and supreme art is so different today than from the 70s or from the 80s. How do you survive as a creator which set basis for style, for genre?
You know, it's a very interesting question, because it's a current question for young artists these days. I would say, don't look around, look somewhere else. I would say also the fact that you know, it's your question is also sending us back to writers in front of bibliothèque, or the national.
When you have a library in front of you, you would think, why should I write?
What should I? Everything has been written already, yes, and very well. So, what can I do? And you know what's very, very interesting is actually there is no progress in human feelings, human emotions. What Chinese, Egyptian musician wanted to create 5,000 years ago, or Western or Indian or an American to 1 century ago, or today, or in one century from now, remains the same. The idea of expressing love or hate or relationship with death, and there are basic human emotions. What makes the difference is who you are. And even if you have millions of people, for instance, you have 100,000 songs being released every day in the world. Yes, but you as an artist, you are still unique. So you will always have the next Pink Floyd, the next Serge Gainsbourg, the next Miles Davis, whatever AI, whatever the number of songs being released. It's I think it's we should not be scared of that. It's not because you have more I would say more opportunities, because it's also an advantage, and more content, that it would devaluate necessarily your own creative process. I don't think so at all. I mean, You know, if you think of recently, for instance, if you take Billie Eilish, for instance, the first, I mean, the instant I heard the first song from Billie Eilish, so it's totally different. We never heard that before, and it was already in the middle of hundreds and thousands and million songs and albums, and it means that, you know, style is coming from who you are, as we said, and it's not a risk. And I would say, like Jean Cocteau used to say, what they don't like in yourself, do it because it's you. You know, I love that.
Jean-Michel, will you allow me to ask a personal question, a very personal question?
I mean, only answers are personal.
Okay.
Questions are not.
Okay. If you think of today's stars, cinema stars especially, you sometimes get the impression that some people really got out of reality and they're living in a parallel universe, in a fictional universe, in a different universe than this one that we live in. Thinking about your success, thinking about millions of copies that you sold. I mean, only Oxygen sold 18 million copies. Thinking about your mega shows, thinking about your laser harp, all that visual effects, and did this ever move you from reality? Did this ever move you from a certain relationship to yourself? I'm deeply interested in this. Did you ever lose contact with yourself, or had this, I don't know, feeling that you're losing contact with yourself and that you move in a parallel universe?
Yes. The answer is yes. You know, in the 80s, it was really a mad decade where lots of us, as I would say, in a kind of rock and roll international world, we all lost a bit of sense of reality because everything was bigger than life, touring and success based on the vinyl and CDs, and the fact that the music industry became from a kind of local craftsmanship to a worldwide industry. Yep. So lots of us, we more or less lost a kind of sense of reality by being involved in bigger and bigger projects, not to make money. I mean, not for me in any way, but for some maybe. But more to try to, I mean, to like as an addiction by the end of the day, and then you and some of us or some of these artists lost themselves forever. So it's difficult to come back. But you know, and one day I realized that what the life of an artist is not. You know, success, hits or failures are accidents. And your life is in the middle. It's like a sinusoid, you know, and you have hits or failures, and you have to accept that as accidents. And the trap is to think that when you're on top, this is your standard. If you think that, you're dead. But if you understand and if you accept the fact that you are in this kind of sinusoid and yes. Sometimes quite ridiculous situation sometimes on both positions, and then but it takes time. It takes time to learn that, and but it's something that a lot. I have the feeling that these days young artists are because maybe of the internet, because of the fact that they are more informed, more conscious. Less unconscious, less naive, maybe.
If you think of the political situation today, just so easy to pronounce just two names, Russia and China. In the most spectacular way, you had immense shows in China and in Russia with with lots of people, millions of people. And you are the first Western artist that the Chinese people were exposed to at that moment. After lots of years of Mao and communism and things like that. So you're the first Western artist that millions of Chinese saw live, playing live. And then, I don't know, 3.5 something, I don't know, million people in Moscow. So China and Russia. When you look back from this perspective today, how do you think of those moments?
I must tell you that I never thought about this in this direction. I hope that I had no responsibility about the situation today, first of all, and secondly, behind this question, there is the question of the position of artists vis-à-vis countries which are generating certainly conflicts or systems which are not the same as ours. And do we have to ignore them or not? And I've been raised by my mom, who told me at a very early stage, when I was still a child, where lots of people in France and in Romania and in all European countries having suffered of Nazis, saying we should make a difference between Nazis and German people, not the same.
Oh, yes.
And also saying that we should not make a confusion and mix an ideology and the people. And the people are not necessarily responsible of the ideology they are victims of. This is the reason why, at a very early stage, I learned the idea that being against all kinds of boycotts. I think and this is the reason why I went to China at that stage. I went to in lots of different countries where because I think that it's not. I mean, the fact that in some countries people don't have the same freedom we have, we should not apply a double punishment, because and then deciding being in a free country like ours, to say, okay, we are going to decide that these people suffering of a wrong system have been cut off from cinema, from culture, from music, from everything. We have to go there, and all people say, yes, but if you go there, you will be used by the government. Go, because culture is a Trojan horse for changing things. And one song, one movie, one book can change the world. So you have to go there. And I'm absolutely, more and more in my life, absolutely committed that tomorrow we have to go to Iran, to North Korea, and because it's the only way to soothe the pain, to also create a link with the people, because these young people we are talking to as artists are the next people in charge. So you have to go there. And but actually, of course, it's always a question of when the China I knew and the Russia I knew is today, of course, slightly different, I would say.
Jean-Michel, I still have 1,000 questions to ask, but I'm afraid we have to say goodbye. Thank you so much, because really today you offered a totally different type of concert. It's the concert of your ideas, and really thank you for that. There's music in your ideas as well, but this concert of ideas is fascinating, and thank you so much for offering this.
Thank you. I was laughing because I think that I had also still thousands of answers. So we should maybe continue the conversation even off, or maybe another
That'll be so great.
Another time.
Thank you so much for accepting this.
Thank you very much.
It's been a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tuturor celor care sunt alături de Garantat 100%, mulțumim frumos pentru încredere. Ne vedem duminica viitoare. Noapte bună!